Hello everyone, today I'm back with another session of our impaction series, and today we will be discussing about disimpaction of the impacted tooth or third. Today we will discuss this topic under the following heading. The first one is the flap design, the bone removal and tooth sectioning, after which elevation of tooth will be done and closure or suturing will be done after proper debridement of the socket. So first we will discuss about the flap design and reflection of the flap. There are different types of flaps that can be used for the exposure of the third molar. We are going to discuss few of them and I'm going to name the rest of them. So the first one is the short envelope flap. So basically these are envelope flaps and they can be divided into short envelope and the long envelope. So we will discuss one by one each of these flaps. The first one is the short envelope flap that we are going to discuss. So the short envelope flap will have a distal incision and a clavicular incision. So for the distal incision, the incision is started on the middle of the lower aspect of the second molar. So this is the distal aspect of the second molar and the incision will start from here. So it will start from here and it will be curved buccally and distally along the external oblique ridge. While we are giving this incision, we should make sure that the incision lie on the bone. And the reason why this incision is flared or curved in a buccal direction is that the ramus of the mandible curves in a lateral direction. So it is important that this portion of the incision, that is the distal incision, should also curve in a lateral direction. So it should flare laterally. These are the characteristics of this incision. Second reason for turning it buccally is that in order to prevent severing of the retromolar artery, which is usually present in a retromolar fossa. So retromolar fossa will be present somewhere in the posterior direction over here, distally to the third molar, and if the incision is not turned buccally, then there are chances that retromolar artery may be damaged. So it should be turned buccally to prevent damage to retromolar artery. And the third reason is to prevent damage to lingual nerve. Right. Now after we have given the distal incision, we will keep the scalpel or the blade on this point only and we will give a clavicular incision. So first let's mark this. This is our distal incision. Right. Now we will give the clavicular incision. This incision will start from the distal part of the second molar and it will be moved in an anterior direction till the free margin of the second molar. So this over here is a clavicular incision. So you can see it all together. This was about our envelope flap. We are discussing short envelope flap which contains two parts, that is distal incision and the clavicular incision. So this is our distal incision and this over here is our clavicular incision while you follow the pointer. Now discussing about the long envelope flap. The long envelope flap is similar to the short envelope flap except that in the clavicular incision, this incision will be extended more anteriorly. In the short envelope flap, the incision stopped at the line angle of the second molar region, but in the long envelope flap, the incision will be extended more anteriorly, crossing the interdental papilla. So in the long envelope flap, the clavicular incision will be extended more anteriorly. It will be extended anteriorly, passing the interdental papilla between the first and second molar over here, and it will end at the mesiobuccal line angle of the first molar. So we'll draw that. So this is our clavicular incision for long envelope flap, and the rest everything will remain same as short envelope flap. The main disadvantage of the envelope flap is that it provides less exposure for an impacted tooth which is placed in deeper plane. So with this flap there will be less accessibility and visibility to the impacted tooth over here. Our next incision is the famous Ward's incision. This incision has three parts. The first one is the distal part or distal incision. The second one is the clavicular incision. So these two incisions or these two parts of the incision is similar to that of the envelope incision, and a third component in this incision is called the vertical part. And the distal incision will begin from the distal part of the second molar. It will turn buccally and in an outward fashion. So this is our distal incision over here. Then comes the vertical part. The vertical incision will be given from the distobuccal line angle of the second molar or the distobuccal cusp tip of the second molar, that is from here, and it will move in a downward and a forward direction, and it will coincide with the buccal groove of the tooth. So this is our vertical part. Now a clavicular incision will be given in order to join the distal and the vertical part. So clavicular part is similar to that of the envelope incision. It will be given in the free margin of the second molar, starting from the distal part of the second molar. Next, we have our modified Ward's incision. This incision is mostly used in cases when the impacted tooth is distoangularly placed or it is horizontally placed, because in these cases we require more of the exposure for accessibility and visibility of the tooth. So this incision is also a triangular incision with three parts, that is the distal part, the second one is the clavicular part similar to that of envelope incision, and the third one is the vertical part. There is a slight difference in the vertical part of the incision as compared to the traditional Ward's incision. So for a modified Ward's incision, the vertical part will begin at the distobuccal corner of the first molar, whereas in the Ward's incision, the vertical part was corresponding to the distobuccal part of the second molar over here, but in this, it will correspond to the distobuccal part of the first molar. So the incision will begin from the distobuccal part of the first molar and move in a downward and a forward direction until it meets the groove of the tooth anteriorly. Then a clavicular incision will be given involving the interdental papilla between the first and second molar, and along the free margin of the second molar it will be taken till the middle part of the distal end of the second molar, and from here the distal incision will be given in an upward fashion, turning buccally and posteriorly. So here you can see this is our distal part, this is our clavicular incision, and this over here is our vertical part. The next incision that we will discuss for today is the L-shaped incision. This is similar to the Ward's incision and it has the three components, that is the distal, clavicular and the vertical part, but there is slight difference in the vertical part of the incision alone. So in the Ward's incision or the modified Ward's incision, we had a beautiful curvature of this vertical incision moving in a downward and anterior or forward fashion. But in L-shaped incision, first we will draw the common components, that is the distal part. This is our distal part, and the vertical part will begin at the distobuccal cusp point of the second molar, as in the Ward's incision, but it will be aligned at a 45-degree angle. So vertical part will be aligned at a 45-degree angle and it will move in a downward and anterior fashion without the curve that is present in the Ward's incision. This over here is our vertical part. This was the clavicular and this was the distal part of the incision. Here you can see the vertical part of the incision is downward and straight. There is no curvature in an anterior fashion. Right? If it would have been in this way, this would be a Ward's incision. But for a L-shaped incision, it is straight and downward. And other than this, there are other incisions such as bayonet incision, sigmoid shaped incision. So now we will talk about raising the mucoperiosteal flap. It should be peeled off from bone in an anterior to posterior direction. Then lingual side of the flap should also be raised, and during the raising of the flap, the periosteal should always rest on the bone in order to prevent the tearing of the flap. Coming to the next topic, that is the bone removal. This is also very important. We have to take in consideration the three criteria for removal of the bone, where all the bone removal is necessary. First one is expose maximum height of contour of tooth. The second reason is the bone obstructing the removal of the tooth should be removed, or the bone obstructing the path of removal of the tooth should be removed. And third reason is that the bone should be removed to create a fulcrum for the engagement of the elevator point. That is, in order to create a purchasing point for placement of the elevator. So these are the three reasons for which the bone removal is necessary. Now for removal of the bone, there are two methods. The first one is the chisel and mallet method, and the second one is the burr method. There are different criteria or indications where each of these methods can be used. So first we will discuss about the chisel and mallet method. The indications for using this method, first one is that in cases where you have to operate on young patients, because in young patients the bone is elastic and it is well defined grain are present in the bone. Second reason is in cases where the external oblique ridge is slightly below the level of bone enclosing the third. Third reason is in cases where the internal oblique ridge is at least slightly behind the third molar. The fourth indication is that where the tooth does not require transverse section. And the fifth indication is in cases where disimpaction is performed under general anesthesia. So these are the five indications for the use of chisel and mallet method. Now we will discuss the indications for use of the burr method. First one is in old patients where the bone is more brittle and which breaks unpredictably when cut with chisel. The second indication is that in cases where the external and the internal oblique ridge are far forward in relationship to the third molar. The third indication is in cases where the sectioning of the tooth is required. And the last indication is in cases where the procedure is performed under local anesthesia. So these are the few indications for both chisel and mallet method and the methods using burr. Now using chisel and mallet method, how bone removal is done. While using the chisel and mallet method, the direction of the trabecules or the grains should be determined in which direction they run. So direction of grains should be determined. A vertical stop must be placed right at the mesial end of the portion of the bone. Bevel of the chisel should face the bone which has to be sacrificed. If the superior bone has to be sacrificed, should face that part of the bone, that is the upper part of the alveolar ridge. Now we will see how a chisel and mallet method is used through a buccal approach. So we will quickly draw a mandible over here for us. Vertical stops in the anterior direction, and this is our vertical stop in the posterior direction. The extent of this vertical line will be here of 7 mm, and that of the posterior vertical stop will be 5 mm. Then chisel is kept in a horizontal direction. If the vertical stop was being made, then the chisel will be turned in a 90-degree direction to make it place at horizontal plane, and through that we will connect the corners of the vertical stop. So we will connect the corners of the vertical stop like this from the anterior. So this is our horizontal cut. And this portion of the bone will be removed. So this was our chisel and mallet method for the removal of the bone. Now coming to the burr method, there are two approaches for using the burr method. First one is the guttering technique, and the second one is the postage stamp method. Right. So first the guttering technique. For this also we will make a diagram first. So first the burr is used to cut the bone close to the tooth, and after a purchase point is being made, then the burr is moved through the cortical bone and cut till it reaches the medullary bone. So the bone will be cut in this direction until it reaches the medullary bone. So the bone is cut in the buccal aspect of the tooth, and then guttering is done in the distal aspect also at the same depth until the burr reaches the medullary bone. Also at distal extension, the distal lingual spur of the bone should be removed in order to remove the obstruction for the removal of the tooth. And then at the mesial end, that is the purchase point where it was created, the elevators are placed, and over here elevator will be placed and the tooth will be elevated. Right. So this was the guttering technique, in which the procedure or the guttering started from the mesial end by using a round burr in order to make a purchase point, and after the purchase point was done, then burr was changed to straight fissure burr and the bone was removed. First the cortical or the superficial bone was removed until the medullary bone reached, and after the buccal region of the bone was removed, the distal part of the bone was also removed until the distolingual spur of the bone was guttered or removed through the burr in order to remove any kind of obstruction while elevating the tooth. After the guttering was done, then at the mesial end, elevator is placed in order to elevate the tooth. Next, coming to the postage stamp method, in this small holes will be made around the margin of the bone that has to be removed. All these holes will be connected through the burr and adequate amount of bone will be removed, following which elevators will be placed on the mesial end or the mesial purchase point in order to elevate the tooth. So in cases of mesioangular impaction, the horizontal impaction, vertical impaction, the elevator will be placed in the mesial direction, whereas in cases where the tooth is distoangularly placed, the purchase point will be made in the distal direction or at the distal point. So before the tooth is actually elevated and removed, we will see if there is a need for sectioning of the tooth or no. So what are the indications for the sectioning of tooth? First indication is in cases if the tooth is locked. So in cases where the tooth is locked against the second molar, then sectioning of the tooth will be required. In cases where there are unfavorable curvature of the roots. And third indication for sectioning is in cases where there is need for the protection of the important structure, such as inferior alveolar nerve in cases of mandibular molar. So how will a tooth be sectioned in cases of various classification of or various angulation of the impacted tooth? So where there is a mesioangular impaction, that is in a mesioangular impaction, normally the tooth will be removed placing the elevator in the purchase point, and if the tooth still resists removal, then the distal cusp of the tooth may be sectioned. The distal cusp of the tooth will be sectioned. Our second case is in cases where there is a horizontal impaction. So we will draw this first. In cases where there is horizontal impaction, sectioning will be done in a transverse direction. That is, if you see over here, the crown of the tooth will be sectioned. The crown is sectioned first. Then a purchase point will be made on the surface of the root, and this root will be directed in a anterior direction, and then it will be elevated. The third instance is in cases where there is vertical impaction. So in this case, the tooth will be sectioned in this manner, and the distal part of the crown and the root will be sectioned and removed first, after which the mesial portion of the tooth will be removed. So this is the case where the roots are separate. But if the tooth was something like this, without separate roots and the roots were fused, then only the distal portion of the crown was to be sectioned, and then it would have been removed, and after which the rest of the tooth would have been removed. For example is in cases of distoangular impaction. So a distoangular impaction would look something like this. This is our ramus. For this, if you see, the distal part of the crown is to be sectioned and it will be removed first, and then later the entire tooth will be removed. Now, what are the advantages of the sectioning? First advantage is that the operating field is minimized. Second is that the amount of bone removal is minimized. The third is that post-operative edema is reduced. Fourth advantage is that the weakening of the jaw resulting in fracture of the jaw will be reduced. So risk of jaw fracture reduced. The fifth advantage is the risk for vital structure damage is reduced. So these were the advantages of sectioning and how tooth sectioning in different circumstances has to be done. This was about the disimpaction procedure. After this, the closure will be done. The wound will be debrided with normal saline, and closure will be done by suturing the wounds. During the entire procedure of disimpaction of a impacted tooth, one thing must be kept in mind, and that is that the bone belongs to the patient while the tooth belongs to the doctor or the surgeon. So care should be taken that minimal amount of bone removal should be done. So with this note, we come to the end of our today's discussion. I hope it was helpful, and it is a wrap for now. I will see you in the next video. Do let me know if you liked the video. Until we meet next with another video, bye bye and take care.